Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach.
All right, here we go.
Here we go. You want to make your announcement?
Yes, this is
Public service announcement.
public
Yeah.
service announcement. For those of you listening, if you like our content, feel free to leave a review.
On whatever platform you're listening?
on whatever platform you're listening to, just to help us get the content out there more.
Nice job. Very slick. Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, today we wanted to talk about miracles. We're in like a miracle sermon series, and I think this is a really important topic to discuss. Annie's got notes.
Just an example, yeah.
Matt's got
His brain.
his brain, and I'm ready to go too. First of all, my question is, have you guys ever experienced a miracle or had something miraculous that to happen to someone you know?
Well, I think it's how do you define a miracle?
Okay. Should we do that first?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. So how would you guys define a miracle?
I don't know.
Well, I think does it have to be extravagant, or does it have?
No, let's hear it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, a miracle in my head could be really anything. I think about times in my life, and I look back in hindsight, and I'm like, whoa, that was miraculous that I avoided that, or that happened, or it didn't happen, or, and so to me, I guess a miracle is every baby that's born. It's the way the trees look and the sky. So for me, it's kind of a broad, which might not be the actual definition. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like when you really think about it, the unlikelihood of life, the unlikelihood that everything is working together, and how God is holding everything together, because you look outside of our little corner of the universe, and it kind of what it looks like when there's just nothing, and now there's so much intention, so many things are working together. I would also add, when people think of miracles, I think they have like supernatural. We've lost the wonder. You swim in this water of our world, and you don't think about how wonderful life is, right? And all the things that have to go right for human life to happen, and for our hearts to keep beating. So you're right. Like, just God's created world is miraculous. But then above what we're normally used to, I think when it seems like God intervenes in ways that even goes above or beyond, or even contradicts how things naturally work.
Can I read this definition?
Yeah,
I
let's
just
hear
looked it up. So there's a few. So a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws is there as, oh my goodness. I'm going to start over. A surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws, and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. Also, a highly improbable or extraordinary event, development, or accomplishment that brings very welcome consequences. And also an amazing product or achievement, or an outstanding example of something. But I like the supernatural piece, the one that defies,
defies what normally you'd expect to happen, right? So first of all, maybe what we need to do is to step back and just look at the natural world as a miracle, which it is. But then there are those events that even go above and beyond how miraculous our natural world is. So if we're using that definition, have you ever experienced that that was surprising, something that usually doesn't naturally happen, even though nature is pretty amazing?
No.
So the one that comes to my mind, we're here at Victory. I love the story. The founding pastor, Pastor Ben Kurth, when they started this church back in Polonia, or maybe it was just even at the house still, they're having like their opening Easter service to start off this church officially. And his wife is pregnant and about to have the baby like a week or two before. Were you here then? You weren't here for that. Okay. And I won't go into the details 'cause I don't know them all, but basically there was some complications. Like uterus ruptured or something like
yeah,
that.
it was pretty bad. I remember hearing the story.
And the child was without oxygen for like 10 minutes or something like that. And the doctor told Pastor Ben Kurth something like, expect your child to either be severely brain damaged or dead. Like that's about all you can expect. And came out with no issues, no problems, nothing. And, so this doctor who wasn't, according to Ben, was not a believer, didn't have any kind of Christian background, it seemed like, he said, I can only explain this as a miracle because I've never seen anything like this. This is so unlikely. And now, I remember running into her. I'm like, she came back for something. I'm like, you're the miracle. And, I don't know if she even knew that, but there's been quite a few stories, I think. So that's one that comes to mind. You driving yesterday and this child was that yesterday?
2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Yeah.
And there was a young child, 2-year-olds or something like that, by the road, and you stopped and picked it up and finally.
Yeah, I mean, the child easily could have just teetered into the road. I mean, it was on the shoulder. It's a gravel shoulder, and right there's the road.
Yeah, and the cars are going 50 miles an hour at least.
Yeah, and thankfully people had slowed down and whatnot. But, you never know if there was something, an invisible hand guiding it away from the road.
Yeah. My dad was in a motorcycle accident 20 years ago now, and the same thing. He's been riding his motorcycle since he was 14, and right before his 50th birthday, it was a hot day, and he was on his way to work, and so he decided not to wear a helmet that day, and I guess he was like coming up over a hill, and the car had stopped on the other side of the hill, and he hit the back of it and flew over the car. Doesn't remember any of this, but that's what they told him. And his brainstem was bleeding, and they said he should have died. And, again, one of those things should have happened, and it just did not happen how you'd expect to happen. And then I think there are quite a few of those kind of people who seem to miraculously heal from cancers or from, when you have accidents that happen and you can't believe, how did that happen? And this person walks away from that without any issues.
Okay. I printed one. An example. I think this was in 2014. A woman's name is Ruby Guarpera Casemiro. Okay, so that's her name. Her heart stopped beating for 45 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
So 45 minutes, she has no pulse. The doctors were about to call the time of death, and they spotted a blip on the monitor. She said she was dead. They were calling in the family. She had gone into the hospital to have a C-section. The surgery was uneventful and the baby was healthy, but the woman started to experience shortness of breath. And the last thing she remembers was being wheeled into the recovery room after the C-section and asking someone for a tissue because her nose felt stuffy. She said it felt like she'd fallen asleep. And then she stopped breathing. Doctors tried for 3 hours to revive her, but it was no use. She had no pulse for 45 minutes. She woke up, during that time, she said she felt herself floating along a tunnel. I remember seeing a spiritual being who I believe was my dad. I remember the light behind him and many other spiritual beings. But suddenly a, quote, force stopped her, and she said she knew she couldn't go any further. Her heart started beating again on its own, even though the doctors hadn't touched her in several minutes. And she woke up without any brain damage. She did not have broken ribs from the chest compressions or burns from the defibrillator when they tried to shock her back. So by all accounts, I mean, she was dead.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't make sense that she would just come back.
Yeah.
But why, why her?
Right. I think now, that's going to be kind of the next question is, okay, so some of these things happen that are beyond what we expect them to normally happen. And we see these also in the Bible where some of the big ones are Moses parting the Red Sea and then getting fed manna and quail throughout 40 years in the wilderness and their clothes not wearing out. And then we think about the New Testament where Jesus fed the 5,000 and healed the sick and raised the dead. and all those kinds of miracles. And then the ones that we're talking about today. So there's a bunch of different questions. I think maybe the first question is, it seems like they're so abundant in the Bible. Why couldn't us here rattle off 10 of them that have happened in our own life, right? Do you ever wonder about that? If they seem like they were happening in the Bible, why don't we see them more today? How would you answer that?
The Bible is just covers so many years.
Okay.
Right, I agree. It's
you have maybe one per generation.
Right.
Which that's not frequent at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, I don't think people always think that.
Sure.
Right? That if God could do it, why doesn't he do it more often?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Parting of the Red Sea, that's hundreds of years after Abraham, actually about 1,000 years after Abraham. And so you have these long stretches. Then after Moses, you don't have much going for miracles for hundreds of years into the future. And then we'd have 400 years of silence. And even in Jesus' day, he didn't heal everybody, and he wasn't, healing the whole nation or everybody. There's few people that we heal and that he healed, and so it's a handful of really accounts. And I think that's a miracle wouldn't be a miracle, like you mentioned. I think life is miraculous, and the natural word's miraculous. It is miraculous, but because we're so used to it,
right.
we don't see it as miraculous. So it isn't that frequent, so we probably shouldn't expect it to always happen. Okay? So I think that is a big thing. Your question was, why this woman and not somebody else?
Yeah.
What do you guys think on that one?
Well, we could always go to the old, God has a plan for everyone, and it was not this woman's time to go. And
right.
I believe that, but
right.
what does a non-believer,
Sure.
If you're looking at this from the point of a non-believer, then why this person?
Yep.
And not my grandpa or my mom or my this or my sister or whatever. Why not? Why this person?
Mm-hmm.
No idea.
Well, that's just it. Then people start taking it on themselves. Well, maybe it's because I did something and therefore, I'm not worthy of having my relative saved, or
sure.
Who knows?
I think that's a really good question. So I'm preaching this weekend on the raising of Lazarus, and when Mary and Martha knew that their brother was sick, they sent this message to Jesus, who's on the other side of the Jordan in Perea, and they said, "The one you love is sick." And then it says in the text that Jesus did love Lazarus, so he stayed longer in Perea, which doesn't seem to make any sense. So they sent this message, not just Lazarus is sick, but the one you love. All right, you've healed all these people, Jesus, but this one is somebody you actually really do. He's your friend. You can heal him. Why don't you come over here? It's not that far away. You love him. And then it says that he did love him, but he stayed there. He stayed there until he died. And not just until he died, but he stayed here until he was dead for 4 days, because an ancient Jewish kind of idea of death was that the spirit hovered over the body for 3 days. And so he made sure he was really dead, and then he went there. And I think that, first of all, it tells us, why didn't, Jesus, there was a prayer there. Why didn't
Drop
you answer?
Everything and go running.
Go do something. And so he did have a plan. And he told his disciples that God is going to be glorified through this, and the Son of Man will be glorified. And this is all for the glory of God. And what that means is God's glory sometimes is revealed in the Bible as his brightness, his holiness, but really it's his character, that he's good, that he's right, that he always does the right thing. That's what makes him glorious, is he's always doing the right thing. And it doesn't seem like Jesus is doing the right thing right there. He's doing the opposite of what you think the right thing would be. But he said, I'm going to do something even better. And then he shows up and he raises Lazarus from the dead, and the people believe. And so my point in the sermon is, when we pray for miracles, God answers yes, or I'll do something better. And, unfortunately, this woman, whoever, she was, that she died, she's going to die again.
Mm-hmm.
And so God will do something better if you prayed for it, either he's going to say, yes, I'll answer that, or he's got, a better plan. And if we would just wait long enough, we'd find out what that better is. I don't know. You think, is that satisfactory, or what do you think?
That's not, I don't think for somebody who doesn't,
Okay.
So
what would be the rebuttal to that, or kind of the challenge to that?
I don't believe that in something better. I don't believe in an afterlife, or I don't believe in, I mean, we can say as Christians, yes, I believe in heaven and I'm going there and it's going to be great and I'm going to see all my people and blah, blah. But not everybody thinks that way.
So I think, especially in the New Testament, miracles, the reason God did miracles was to give us insight in the life of the world to come. That Jesus was showing us that his kingdom was being shown on earth as it always is in heaven. And one day, all people will be healed fully. And so these miracles are little insights in the life that is to come, where we will be healed. We will be completely healthy and happy. And so they're glimpses into the life to come. That's what their job is, because in this world as it is right now, we don't want God to keep us around forever. We don't want to suffer forever. And so there are glimpses into the future. That's why he did them, so that we would believe in him, so that we'd look forward to that. Now, to a person who doesn't have that hope, I mean, I think that is going to be a real challenge. I don't believe that there is a bigger plan. I don't believe that there is an answer. And yet I would just encourage people, just wait. You might not see it right now, but just wait. How do you know? You just you have a limited perspective. And maybe he will. Maybe there is a way right now that he's going to make this, reveal this to you. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
I don't think it's any different than anything else that you pray for.
Okay.
If you pray for a miracle, or if you pray for, some other problem you have, and then you can get upset in both cases. God didn't give me what I prayed for. And I think regardless of whether you believe in God or if you think he's being unfair, whatever, if you have a strong faith or a weak faith, you always have to answer the question, well, why should you get what you want? Who says what you want is good?
Yeah.
You say well, I think that person should have been healed. Okay, but surely you can think of a time in your life that you wanted something, and now in hindsight you can say, okay, it's a good thing I did not get that.
Right.
And the Bible says, suffering produces perseverance,
right.
and perseverance produces character, etc.
Could we sing God's Greatest Gifts Are Unanswered Prayers by Garth Brooks this weekend? Is that on the list?
I don't have enough time. I've never even heard. Is that a thing?
Kidding.
Is that a song?
It is a song. Yeah. It's it's really corny, but it's Garth Brooks.
Okay.
Do we do a lot of Garth Brooks at
Garth?
We dabble, throw in a little Garth now and then.
And then we'll do the Thunder Rolls after that for Judgment Day, and
He's got a whole
list.
All right.
No, that is a really good point. And there's biblical accounts of that, where the story of Hezekiah, he was a king and he got really sick and he asked God to heal him. And he was on the verge of death, and God did heal him, and he survived another 10 years. And in those last 10 years, he got really arrogant and let the Babylonians come in. And it's be careful what you prayed for. If you just would have died, you wouldn't have caused all these issues with this foreign army and being full of pride. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to that cliche of, everything happens for a reason. I think I've told you guys both kind of off air about the podcast I just listened to. It's a Dateline podcast. Shocker. If you know me, I love my true crime. But it's like an 8-part series titled Letters from Sing Sing. And it tells the story of a man who was wrongly convicted and spent about 24 years in prison. And he had written to one of the Dateline producers kind of at the start of his journey and said, I need help. I look into this for me. Everybody says they didn't do it, but he really did. And so this man fell through all the cracks and all this stuff. And he just wanted to get out, and his family suffered as a result of him being locked up. But while he was in prison, He got a college education.
Yeah. Wow.
He started all these community activities and fundraisers and things like that. And he even found 3 men in his prison that were also wrongly convicted, and he asked the Dateline producers to look into their cases as well. They did, and those 3 men who had also spent 18-ish years in prison were then released from prison. So as a result of this well-spoken, articulate, brilliant man, wrongly convicted, going to prison for 24 years, 3 other wrongly convicted men were exonerated. So, I mean, it sucks, right? Like big time. But there was like a lot of really good stuff that came out of it also. So,
you said, well, if somebody doesn't believe in that, like, I think one of the things that Jesus keeps saying in that Lazarus account, he's like, I'm doing this so that you believe. If you believe, you will see the glory of God. And he talks about believing over and over again. And if you don't believe there's a bigger plan and you don't believe that God is with you, why not just give up? But if you do believe God is with you, that I am here for a reason, and even though I was falsely accused, like Joseph was in book of Genesis, and I'm in the wrong place the wrong place at the wrong time. If you believe that God is going to do something better, I think that keeps you kind of, keeps you afloat, keeps you kind of going back to the surface instead of drowning. In Isaiah, he's predicting that this whole evil empire is going to come in, the Babylonians. And so he says this, he says, the righteous perish and no one takes it to heart. The devout are taken away and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. Those who walk uprightly enter into peace. They find rest as they lie in death. And so he's saying, like, somebody's dying and you think, oh my goodness, what a tragedy. They're dying so young. And this passage is saying no one gets it, that God is taking this person before this invasion comes in, before they experience all these things, before we just don't know. And so it does take belief. It does take faith. And it is wonderful when we get a miracle. I mean, there's just that also can encourage our faith and can help us grow. But we also can grow in the midst of it when there isn't the miracle, to believe that God does have a bigger plan. It keeps us moving forward. It keeps us open to opportunities that could be happening. So, yeah. What do you think of, Matt?
I'm thinking kind of back to what Annie said at the beginning, like to just see the little things as miracles too.
Yeah.
And maybe like you don't necessarily define like every little thing as supernatural, but I think it's that same idea as like trying to just be grateful for things.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to look at the things you buy and say, well, I provided this for myself. That I taught myself this. I equipped myself to do this. So I'm not really grateful to anybody else because I did it. But your life is just better if you just keep giving the thanks and the glory to God who gives all things.
That's right.
And same thing with miracles, is like it might just seem like, oh, you're just putting sort of like religious rhetoric around it, and that's not necessarily a miracle. You're just an overly Jesus-y person. But if you take every opportunity to point everything back to God, that's a good thing.
Yeah. It makes you, which kind of person do you want to be around? The cynical person who feels entitled to everything, or the person who's like surprised by life and excited and thankful, and I can't believe this. And I remember one time I was at a dentist appointment, and I'm looking at the X-ray of my teeth, and I'm like, isn't it amazing how like this is just designed to put the way it is? And he started talking about evolutionary reasons for our teeth being that way. But like, but for me, I just look at this as just designed perfectly for all the different reasons we would need teeth. And he's like, yeah, you're right. There's another doctor that I go to conferences with, and he became a believer as he thought about the process of clotting, which I got a blood
Oh,
clot.
no.
But he said
Too
it's
soon.
like, yeah, too soon, I guess. He's like, I started to realize, I don't know what it is, like 8 things need to happen in order at the right time for a clot to happen so you don't bleed out every time you get a cut, and for the clot to not happen so you don't have what I have. And he says, none of that could have happened over billions of years, a step-by-step process. That all has to be there. And he said, I started to realize like there was miracles in all these different natural things that could not be explained except by an intentional designer. So I think being surprised by the natural world, getting excited by music and all these incredible gifts that we have, that's a start. And then being open to God, even going above and beyond the wonder he's already done. Yeah. It was kind of I think many of the founders of our country were deists, where they were really surprised and excited about how the world started, but then they believed that God kind of went on a vacation and he was not involved. And I don't want us to be that way, where to believe that God still can and does do miracles, and for whatever reason, not always the way we want it, but having that faith that he can. And if he says no, then he's got something better.
Yeah.
Well, right. And I think, sometimes you look in hindsight and sometimes you can kind of get a very small glimpse of a very small, teeny tiny little piece of God's plan when you start realizing, I'm glad I didn't do this or get this or have this happen to me.
Yes.
I'm glad I didn't go that route. I'm glad because you can kind of see how things could have, it just hindsight just makes, I think it does give us just a little, and hopefully that's not blaspheming to say, but
it does. And I think the trick then, faith is believing in that in the moment, what you'll figure out in hindsight.
Right.
And that's what faith is, to believe that God has a purpose even before you see it. And you will see it. It's going to happen, and you're going to look back and be like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. But to believe it before you can see it. Yeah.
I think part of the cool thing is, like, if we say a miracle is something that we can't explain, well, then in theory, there wouldn't be so many, but there still are. Like, you can look back and you can be like, well, they said it was a miracle, but they also drank mercury, so what do they know?
Right.
But modern science is still not explaining people's hearts healing and cancer disappearing and things like that.
Sure. And even in the account of the parting of the Red Sea, it says that there was a wind that drove back the water throughout the night. So, and then the wind brought in the quail. So, when God does miracles, if you were able to look at the thing as it was happening, could you put together an algorithm or a scientific explanation of how it happened and how maybe God moved or changed some of the laws or whatever in that moment, that you could, have a natural explanation of even the supernatural event? I think that could be possible,
Yeah.
So I don't think, just because you can explain something doesn't mean it wasn't miraculous.
Right.
I think that's what the problem so often is. We think if we know how something works, then now it's not wonderful anymore.
Yeah.
But just because you can put it in a formula or write it in an equation doesn't mean it's still not miraculous.
And I just think, like, the more we keep learning, the more we learn how little we know.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, we are making progress in the sense of like research, but we're not getting anywhere close.
No. Right.
And
exactly.
I think that's super cool.
It is. And I think that's why you'll always have room for asking for God's guidance and prayer, and you'll always have something to do because we want to keep growing. I think God, he told us that's what I love again about the Bible, is on the first page of the scriptures, he said, now you're my representatives to rule over this earth. Find out everything you can about it. And we've been here for however long you think we've been here, and we still haven't figured it out. There's always going to be more work to do, and yet there's always room for us to be guided in prayer. Like, God, I don't know what to do here. I need your guidance. So keep learning, keep growing, keep discovering, keep making scientific. Sometimes people say, well, if you are full of faith, then you're not interested in solving problems, and you're not going to be interested. You're just going to trust God and not try to solve problems. But if you believe, and the first founders are like, Isaac Newton and many of the founders of what we call science and the scientific method were all Christians because they believed there was a designer who was intelligible that we could learn from behind the world. And so their faith did not keep them from science, actually made them want to do science. So, yeah, I think God wants us to use our brains as much as we can. And yet, like you said, there's so much room for us to say, I still don't know. I still need God's guidance. Yeah.
Yeah. My other thing for the people who are teetering on the faith or who don't believe in miracles because they're not scientifically possible, just watch that you're not going both ways on it, because no one can explain the Big Bang. It's like, where did all that stuff come from?
Right.
They're like, well, we don't know yet, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Be consistent. Yeah.
And I could say, well, Jesus rose from the dead, and you say that's impossible. And I said, well, we just can't explain it. That doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And whether we say it's really, really hard to describe or really, really hard to explain, but science has the answer. I mean, I would say, like, is it or I could say a miracle is supernatural. Well, sure, God is natural, though, because he exists.
Right.
And so if he can do something, then it can happen.
Right.
And there's, at a certain point, those two things, there's not a difference between them.
Right. And, I mean, what science is looking for is something repeatable. I guess that's the thing that makes miracles different, is they're not repeatable.
Sure.
But, okay, if we could explain the resurrection of Jesus and somehow we were able to scientifically explain why that happened that time and what exactly God was doing there, explaining it still does not say it happened or didn't happen, right? An explanation. But maybe that would be another way to define miracles, is things that aren't repeatable. Like, yeah, this happened, and maybe we could explain why it happened that one time, but we're also fine with science, like how much we can't even repeat science. There's still so much mystery. I remember one of my favorite science professors, I think he's got a mountain named after him in Antarctica because of all the studies he did and different things. But he said, we think we know how science works and is repeatable, but there's so many factors we don't even know. So to have a controlled scientific study like almost never works. Yeah. We get somewhere, but usually we don't get anywhere. Were you about to say something?
No.
Okay.
Oh, I was gonna say I shared you guys that comic about.
Oh yeah.
We're almost on the verge of creating life to prove that life wasn't created.
Isn't that funny?
About the primordial soup and all that, which is, if you don't know evolution, but life came out of like soup,
right?
Which to me just it hits the nose on the head. Like, why are we're so convinced it happened because that's our only theory at this point. And here we are failing to make it happen again. And even if we did make it happen, that doesn't prove that it's the thing that actually happened in the past.
Right. And if everything came by blind chance and there's no reason or rhyme behind the world, like, why not just stand back and let it all happen again? Because we're saying it all happened on its own. Why should we have to create experiments to try to force something if everything just came all by itself without any intention? So, yeah, that's a bigger... What I think, every once in a while, I do think God allows us to see his hand at work so that we're reminded his hand's always at work. That story of the Kurth family reminds me that every birth is a miracle, and you start praying about everything. And so I'm thankful for these glimpses into God's work to remember it's all his work. Yeah. I don't know. That's about all I got. You got some other thoughts?
Yes.
Okay.
The other day, so we like to talk about mental health on this channel a lot.
Yes.
The other day, I was at a grocery store and I saw like these pizzas and everything, and one of them was like supreme pizza with all this stuff on it. It had green olives. And
yes, I'm a fan.
No.
Yeah. I know you don't like Matt doesn't like olives.
Good Lord. To me, that is a self-esteem issue. For anyone listening, green olives are disgusting. They're oily and slimy and salty. You don't have to do that anymore.
They're not oily.
No, they're not oily.
Oh my
they're
gosh,
delicious.
disgusting.
Good fat. Good
They're
source
good on
of fat.
pizza.
Yeah,
They're
good on
Have you
pizza.
had them on pizza?
Yeah,
Yuck.
pizza
It's great.
and
Gross.
salads.
No.
I buy a big Costco jar of green olives.
Yeah.
It's
Why do you say they're
disgusting.
oily? They're not oily. What olives have you been eating?
They're so creepy
I mean,
looking.
olive oil comes from, I guess.
Yeah,
it's oil.
exactly.
The
Olive
pimentos are a
oil.
little weird.
No.
Okay,
So
anyway,
oh my gosh, you guys are so wrong. So wrong. You don't have to do this. You, both of you. You are loved. You are valued by Jesus. You can stop this self-destructive behavior.
God made olives too.
Yeah, he did.
Oh my gosh, you can't
So anyway,
prove
you
that.
saw the pizza, and this is
That-
just an olive rant, or what?
Yeah.
This is an olive rant.
Okay.
It just brought back memories of like being in close proximity and having to smell them and awaken some repressed memories of just
You're very particular on your palate.
His
I
food,
am.
he's texture, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very. One might say fussy
Fussy.
or
picky.
persnickety.
Yeah. Still single,
Persnickety, yes.
Well,
That was enlightening.
yeah. Do you?
That was my second PSA for the episode.
Yeah. Very good. How does that work when if like you go on a date? Like how does that work?
Let me
wouldn't know.
stop you
That's
right,
right.
there.
I think we're seeing some connection here.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Peace.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. BSADLER@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name. Hello.